So the next part of this section is labeled tariffs in a large economy. And so we're going to consider our world economy consisting of two countries, home and foreign. And so this is similar to the setup as before. Home, we're going to consider to be a large country in terms of world trade. So what that's going to mean is that home's policies, for instance, if it chooses to set a tariff, that may now affect the world price. So let's consider that both countries are going to produce a single homogeneous good. Let's call it corn. And we have these given equations for home and foreign's demand and supply. And so these are going to be equations that are going to tell us that home's demand is going to be downward sloping, foreign's demand is going to be downward sloping, and home and foreign supply is going to be upward sloping. Okay. So what problem one is going to ask us is it's going to ask us to solve for the equilibrium price and quantity of corn in each country under autarky. And so in order to figure out the equilibrium price and quantity, we just need to set domestic demand equal to domestic supply. And so to do that for home, what we're going to do is we just set this equation equal to, so our demand and supply equation is equal. And so that gives us 200 minus 20p equal to 20 plus 20p. And so just manipulating things on each side, if I subtract by 20 on both sides, I get 80 on the left-hand side. And then if I add 20p to both sides, then I get 40p on the right-hand side. And then dividing by 40, what do I get? I get that the price must be 2. Okay. And then if I want to plug back in for the quantity that's going to be produced, I can either plug in for a price of 2 into either the demand or supply equation. So let's do the quantity supplied at a price of 2. And that's going to be equal to 20 plus 20 times 2. And so we're going to see that that's just going to give us 60. Let's confirm that plugging 2 into the demand equation is going to give us the same answer, which it will. So the quantity demanded at a price of 2 is going to be give us 200 minus 20 times 2. And so, as we would expect, that also gives us 60. Okay, and so what we now can do is we can also do the same for foreign. And for foreign, that's going to look the same. We're just going to set foreign's demand equal to its supply. And then we can manipulate things to figure out that foreign's price is going to be equal to 1. And then if we plug a price of 1 into either the supply equation or the demand equation, then what we should get is that the quantity supplied and demanded is going to here be equal to 60. Okay. So now let's move on to problem 2. And so problem 2 is going to be, what is going to be the patterns of trade once these two countries start trading? And so in order to do that, what we want to do is we want to derive home's import demand and foreign's export supply curves for corn. So home's import demand is basically going to be the difference, this is starting with foreign's export supply. So foreign's export supply, is going to be the amount that foreign is going to supply of corn minus the amount it's going to demand. And this is defined as the export supply curve if and only if this is positive. If this was negative, then foreign would actually be importing corn, and so this would be sort of -1 times this would actually be the import demand curve. But anyway, so what we want to do is that we want to take foreign's amount that it supplies of corn minus the amount that it demands of corn at a given price. And so, so this term right here, this is going to be foreign's supply curve. This term right here is going to be foreign's demand curve. And so subtracting one from the other, we end up getting that foreign's export supply is going to be -40 plus 40p. Okay, and so we can also do the same for homes import demand for corn. And so recall that homes import demand is going to be the amount that it demands more than the amount that it supplies. And remember that this is only going to be the import demand if this is positive. If instead we had that home was supplying more than it was demanding, it would be exporting. So again, we're just plugging in for, we're going back to these equations right here, and all I'm doing is, if I want to figure out homes imports of, say, corn, then I'm taking homes demand minus its supply. And so here that's going to be equal to 200 minus 20p minus minus 20 minus 20p. And so what that's going to give us, it's going to give us 80 minus 40p. And so let's go back and double check that I did the math right. And so that makes that sort of vibes with what's on the slides. Okay, so that's how you derive homes import demand. So now to figure out the patterns of trade once these two countries start trading, what we can do is we can to figure out the patterns of trade once these two countries start trading is that we know that we're going to have, in order to figure out the free trade equilibrium, so in order to figure out what prices are going to be once these countries are going to open to trade, we can either use the equations that total world demand equals total world supply. So this is total world demand. And this expression here on the right is total world supply. Or equivalently, what we can do is we can just rewrite this top expression by subtracting basically if we subtract QFD on both sides and looks like we've subtracted QHS on both sides here, then we can equivalently also use the condition that this is homes import demand and this is foreign's export supply. And so setting these two equal is going to give us what our price and then ultimately quantity of imports is going to be here. So let's do that. So the world market for corn is going to clear at a price that's going to set import demand from home and export supply of foreign equal. And so going back to what we figured out for both of foreign's export supply and home's import demand means that we're going to set these two equal. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 20 on both sides. And so I'll get 20 on the left-hand side. I'll add 40 times the 40 times the world price on both sides. So what I'll get is I'll get 120 120 I'll get 120 equals 80 PW. And so then 120 divided by 80 will be my world price. And if you note that these both are multiples of 40, then you can see that this is just going to simplify down to 3/2. And so the world price here is going to be 3/2 or 1.5. And then what we want to figure out is then sort of all of the quantities that home consumes and then home imports. So let's note that the same price is faced by consumers and suppliers of both home and foreign. This is just the world price. And so the equilibrium supply and demand quantities at home, well, if we go back to just our equations for supply and demand at home that we had initially and plug in for 3/2, then we get that the quantity demand at home is going to be 70 and the quantity supplied at home is going to be 50. So if we just go and we look at, we recall that home's import demand is going to be its quantity demanded minus its quantity supplied. Well, we know that this is 70 and this is 50. So we know that home's import demand is going to be 20. Okay, so now moving on to problem 4, let's suppose that home is going to impose a specific tariff of 1/2 on corn imports. What we want to figure out is the effect of the tariff in the world equilibrium. And so this import tariff is going to effectively create a wedge between the internal and external price with respect to home. So when home is going to impose a tariff of 1/2 on corn, the effective price faced by home is going to be whatever this world price is plus this specific tariff T. And so all of this is the same as before. But what's new is that PW prime is going to be the new world price under tariffs. And so we're allowing that the fact that home has now imposed this tariff of 1/2 might change the world price. And so foreign isn't imposing any tariffs. So the price that foreign effectively faces is going to be this new world price. And so what's going to happen to foreign's export supply is it's going to shift. And so basically, let's go back to foreign's export supply equation. So this is the same as before. And then all we're doing is we're going to note that the home's price, home's new price it faces, is just the new world price plus T. So then if we just rewrite, home's new world price, which is equal to P price of world plus T, and we subtract T on both sides, then what do we get? We get the PH minus T is the new world price. And so I can just substitute that in on this side. Okay. And so then what this is going to give me is plus 40 times PH minus T. And then if I just distribute this out, what I'll get is I'll get -40 plus 40 PH prime minus 40 times T. Okay. And then what I can do is I can notice that 40 is in both this one and this one. And so what I'll get is that if I just pull out -40, I'll get this line right here. -40 will be times 1, so that's here. And then plus T, plus T. So this is plus. And then we'll still have plus 40 PH prime. Okay. And then if we know that this is equal to 1/2, then this is going to be 3/2 times 40. And so that is just equal to -60 plus 40 PH prime. And so I'll just add in the 40 PH prime for completeness above. Okay, so that's how we figure out how the foreign export supply curve is going to shift as a function of the effective new price faced by home. So now let's consider the import demand curve at home. Well, since we've rewritten everything with home's new price, effectively the import demand curve at home, it's just going to stay the same. So this is the same as the import demand curve that we saw previously. Instead of the world price there, we're just substituting in for home's new price. So what is going to be the price of corn at home, and why didn't this price increase by the amount of the tariff? And so now the new world equilibrium price can be solved for as follows. We're just going to set the new foreign export supply curve, the new home import demand curve equal. And so what that's going to give us is that if I add 40 pH on both sides, 40 pH prime, and I add 60 on both sides, then I get that pH is equal to 80 pH is equal to 140. And so pH is equal to 140 over 80. Those zeros cancel. I can divide by 2 to get that this is 7 over 4. Okay, so the new world price is going to be 7 over 4. But recall that the world price is going to be whatever home's price is minus T. And so if I know what the pH prime is equal to 7/4, well, then that's equal to, excuse me, that's equal to, if I add that, recall that the tariff was half, then this is going to equal the new world price. And so I can just make this 2/4. And so note that that's going to be 9/4 is the new world price. And 9/4 is just 1.25. Or wait, there's something off here. I see. Sorry, I see that I made a mistake here. I needed to subtract 2/4. So let's go back. Sorry about that. And so the world price will be 7/4 minus 2/4. That's going to be equal to 5/4, and that's equal to the new world price. Whereas 5/4 is just the same as 1.25. So sorry about that little math mistake. I needed to subtract rather than that. Okay, and so as a result, the new price to foreign faces, it's just going to be 1.25. And so note, this solution method said that what we did is we substituted in the world price with home's price. We could have also just left for foreign's export supply curve, we could have left this constant and instead substituted in for home's price with this, and that would be an equivalent way to do things. I just chose to substitute in the world price with home price, but we could have also substituted in home's price with the world price. Okay. If you want to see how to do that, we just instead here would have plugged in 40 PW prime plus T. And so that would be an equivalent way to solve it. And then you'd solve, you just sort of multiply everything out. So you get 80 minus 40 P prime minus 40 times T. And then this is, T is half. So then this would just be negative 20. And so what you get is you get that this is equal to 60 minus 40 PW prime. Okay. And then you could use that, and then you could set that equal to foreign's export supply curve, and you should get that the price is the same. So let's move on to problem 5. And so the price is going to change because with tariffs, the domestic price for corn for home is now higher. And we're going to have that producers at home are going to supply more, while consumers at home are going to demand less, and therefore import demand for corn at home will fall. This is all the same as what we saw in tariffs with a small economy, but the new part here is that the decline in import demand is going to lead to a decline in the world price. So if we go back, we note that the world price is now 1.25. Well, before the world price was 1.5, and so we can note that home's application of a tariff has actually increased the world price. And so the new equilibrium supply and demand quantities at home are as follows. We can just plug in for what the new price at home is going to be, which is going to be 1.75. Excuse me, I got to clear this. And so that's going to give us that home is going to demand 65, and they're going to supply 55 units. So if home's new import demand here is going to be smaller, or sorry, home's import, I don't know why I put an S. Home's import demand is now just going to be the amount that they demand minus the amount that they supply. That's 65 minus 55, which is equal to 10. So home's import demand is going to be 10, and that's going to need to be less than what their import demand was from before, which I believe was 20. So moving on, we can ask what are going to be the welfare effects of this tariff at home. And so the price faced by consumers is going to rise overall. So consumer demand is going to fall, and we're going to have a reduction in consumer surplus. And so that's going to result in a decrease in consumer surplus of areas B, C, and D. So this is basically just the reverse of the situation we thought before when we sort of reduced the tariff and the problem thinking about tariffs in a small economy. So that's fairly straightforward. And so the consumer's welfare loss is going to be negative A times the change, basically the area of A. Sorry, this isn't change. This is negative the amount of area of A, B, C, and D. We can think about the effects on producers. So now producers have face an effectively higher price. And so producers gain area A because now producers produce at a higher price. So this is similar to before. But the government has now imposed a tariff, and so before it wasn't receiving any revenue on imports, and so now when it applies a tariff, it basically applies that tariff to all of the quantity of imports. So now that's just we have 10 imports, and it's imposing a full tariff, which recall that the tariff here is equal to 1.5, or sorry, 0.5. And so it's applying that full tariff to all of the 10 imports that it has. So the government has gained revenue C plus E. Okay, so now we can do an accounting exercise and we can say that the net welfare gain is going to be whatever producers gain plus whatever the government's gain. So that's C plus E minus whatever the consumer's welfare loss is. And so that's been A plus B plus C plus D. And so then adding all that up, we got that the net welfare gain is going to be given by E minus B plus D. And so we want to sort of figure out, is a tariff welfare increasing overall? And unlike the case of the small open economy, where we saw that reducing a tariff had an unambiguously positive gain, and so likewise you can sort of imagine that if you increase the tariff, that would result in a negative net negative loss. Here it's ambiguous. It depends on whether or not E is greater than the size of B plus D. And so if E is larger than B, the area of B and D, then we have that our country actually has a net welfare gain. So that is, if the increase in government revenue given by E is larger than the deadweight loss given by B and D, then this could be net welfare increasing. And so the only way to do that here is we actually need to calculate each of those areas. And so note that E here, you can see E a little bit bigger if I go back. E is going to be the sort of difference between the sort of new world price and the original world price times the total amount of imports. So it's not the total amount of tariff applied to all of our imports. It's just the difference between the new world price and the old one. And so calculating that area, that's going to be the difference in height between 1.5 and 1.25 and the total amount of imports. So note that this here is just imports, this second term. And so calculating this out, we got that E has an area of 2.5. And so next, what we want to calculate is we want to calculate the areas of B and D. And so these are triangles that are deadweight loss. And so it's basically the amount of consumer surplus that we've lost going from a world price of 1.5 to a new home price of 1.75. So we've lost areas B and D. And so that's going to be basically, we're going to take 1.75 minus 1.5 times the change in both the amount that consumers demand and domestic producers supply, and then multiply by half because it's a triangle. And so what doing all that out gives us is it's going to give us that the area of B is 6.625 and D is going to be the same. and the only reason here is because that they're the same is that these two lines seem like they have the same slope, but these may not always be the same area. And so the net welfare gain, E is greater than the sum of both B and D. So the net welfare gain is 1.25. And so here, we've actually seen that tariffs are net welfare increasing. And so if I'm a large country, it's possible that applying a tariff is actually going to be net welfare increasing for me, because the reduction in import demand is going to lower the world price. And so it's possible that that lowering of the world price is going to lead to the additional government revenue applied gain from applying that tariff to the lower price is going to outweigh any deadweight loss that's borne by consumers. And so this shows that for large countries, it might actually be welfare maximizing for them to apply tariffs, even though for the case of small countries, it never will be. So that's section 9. I hope this has been helpful. If anything is unclear, feel free to attend either my office hours or my usually scheduled section time. So thanks so much, and hope everyone is staying safe.